will be recorded so that you can view it later. I'll be posting an attendance link in the chat in just a minute, so make sure that you complete that attendance form in order to receive your professional learning credit. You only have to complete that one time for today. And I will also provide the link for you to register in PowerSchool. I'll place that in the chat in just a moment, so make sure that you complete that too. You'll see some hashtags because we'd like for you to let everyone know that you're here on social media. I'll be placing those in the chat, and just a few other links like the bootcamp website and the bulletin board. So Dr. Hamilton, if you are ready.
Okay, in the chat, will you put your year of certification? So what year did you certify? Or if you've already renewed one time, put your year of renewal next to it and just put an R so I know it's renewal. Okay, great. We're all kind of right in there. We're all kind of right in there together. All right, let me share my screen and we'll get started. And then I'm going to, there we go. Okay, here we go. And so from this point on, it's hard for me to see the chat. So Misty will be helping us today. So welcome to Maintenance of Certificate. We are continuing to grow together as NBCT. So I'm super excited to be here with you today and helping you kind of look at the Maintenance of Certificate. So this presentation is actually Dr. Shields, and I have just modified it. And so she's been sweet enough to let me use some of her work. Down at the bottom of this screen are our hashtags, which Misty said that she was going to put in the chat box for you. And then I've also got my Twitter link and Dr. Shields' Twitter link as well. And so I have went through certification in 2005 and renewed in 2015. And I have done either renewal or MOCs to, oh gosh, hundreds of NBCTs at this point. So you're in pretty good hands. If you have a question, or I get really excited about MOC, and so if I'm talking too fast or you need clarification, feel free to interrupt me or raise your hand or ask a question in the chat, okay? And so let's take a look. We're going to do some background, and then we'll dig into MOC, and then we'll look at all the things about that, and then we'll do some practice together, and we'll just go from there. So for today, we're going to just overview all the logistics for MOC, connect with those core propositions and standards, and then really do a deep dive into components 1 and 2, and then give you some tips and other considerations to think about. Now, there's a good chance as I'm going through this presentation that I'll say renewal, and we'll have to fix myself to MOC, because MOC is, we went through that last year, and I was still working with renewal candidates at that point. And so forgive me if I have to transition back and forth between MOC and renewal. Okay, so a couple of things. If you have not already done so, then in the presentation, which I think was should be provided for you. And if you don't have it, just let us know and I'll be able to stick it in the chat box. The Maintenance of Certificate guide is in there. So you'll see throughout the presentation that I'll refer to specific pages in that maintenance of certificate. So those are for you to be able to go back in and connect from this content with the National Board information in the maintenance of certificate document. And then also your content standards. In some of the questions, some of the prompts will be looking at your specific standards. So while you're waiting to kind of dig into the MOC, go back and look at your standards for your certificate area. So here's where we're looking at for your MOC deadlines. So some of you will be right here looking at your second second opportunity for MOC, or maybe your first opportunity for MOC. And here are your deadlines depending on when your certificate expires. So a lot of you are right here in this area, and I'm right there with you because my renewal was in 2015. And so I'll need to go through maintenance of certificate in 2025. I'll start in 2024. And so I'm right here in the process with you and starting in the path towards MOC. So we'll be looking at three terms that I'll use a lot today in this presentation. One, MOC, that's your maintenance of certificate. It's no longer renewal. Everyone is in the maintenance of certificate who is going through the keeping of your certificate. PGE is your professional growth experience, and we will spend a lot of time today looking at your professional growth. When you're looking at your professional growth experiences, or wherever you see a PGE, those are new learning that you've done, areas of growth that have happened. It could be something that you started digging into 5 or 10 years ago, and now is something that you serve in the leadership capacity, or maybe it's even something recent that you have noticed is a great need in your district, and you've grown in this area and you've seen how it has impacted your students and their learning. And then samples of products, or you'll see an SOP. These are documents that provide evidence for the things that you're going to talk about in those PGEs that we're going to dig into here in just a few minutes. So good, are you good? Let me look in the chat real quick. All right, we've got information that's being posted in there. Okay, excellent. Okay, so why would we want to maintain our certificate? So in the last 5 or 10 years, you've gone through a significant amount of growth. And I would imagine that last year you had more growth than you really wanted to have, possibly, because it was a huge, I know for myself during the pandemic, it was a huge, I had many growth opportunities. And so that could be a reason. Or you may want to reflect or continue on your journey.
I sent something to the printer, but I haven't printed. I'm sorry.
That you want to reflect and reflect on the impact that the things that you have learned have had on your student learning. Or maybe you're like me, and that NBC title, I put that everywhere because I'm very proud of the work that I've done with national boards, and I want other people to know that I'm in an NBCT. And then your salary stipend. So maybe you're a math or science teacher and you're looking into the Teams supplement, or here you've got we get that stipend from Alabama every year. And I don't know, but I consider that at this point to be part of my salary, and I wouldn't want to lose that. To continue in your licensure, or really just open up leadership opportunities. There's something about being an NBCT that carries a lot of weight to it. Now, what you'll find with maintenance of certificate is that it's a little bit more manageable than the initial certification, or even with the renewal. So here you're looking at $570, which is just a small chunk out of our stipend. with a $75 registration fee. The only thing that you'll pay that $75 registration fee in your initial payment. And then it's really achievable. National boards did some studies with MOC and a pilot group, and 9 out of 10 of their candidates went through or successfully ended or successfully completed a maintenance of certificate. So that's really encouraging, that 9 out of 10. So where the learning curve for initial certification is really high and you don't have that many people completing on their first attempt, that's not true for MOC, that most teachers will. And usually that 1 out of 10 is a logistics thing that happened, that you didn't complete the prompts or you weren't giving your lesson in your certificate area. And those are things that I'm going to try to help you with today. And then it's pretty quick and straightforward, where you had hours and hours of work for your initial certification. And even if you've been through renewal one time, it was a lot of work and lots of crying. So for MOC, you could really get everything completed in 2 weekends if you had the videotape and had figured out what your PGEs are. It's pretty straightforward, and you can get it done very quickly if you wanted to. So those are, not that there won't be some crying, because there probably will be, but just not as much as an initial certification. All right, so what you need to remember with MOC is that you're just keeping your certificate active. It's kind of like renewing your driver's license. You just have to have a little bit more evidence than you do for your driver's license. You're not recertifying. National boards knows that you are already an accomplished teacher, and you're just showing national boards that you're continuing to grow in your professional growth and in growing your students and in being part of that learning community. And then also that you're still using the architecture of accomplished teaching, and those 5 core propositions are part of who you are as a teacher. So look at these terms, and in the chat box, I'm going to ask you to do something. Which of these best describes you? Are you A, you want to continue your status as an NBCT because you feel like teachers need to always be learning and evaluating themselves, and how can you help your students grow as learner as if you're not growing as a learner? Or maybe D, a 50-hour commitment isn't too bad and the cost is lower, so you see it as more achievable. Could you be B, where it will help you grow as a teacher or a professional? Or is it C, that you believe the maintenance certificate will help you focus on your teaching in your classroom and refine your process? Which one of these best speaks to you? In the chat box, tell me, are you an A, a B, a C, or a D? Yeah, most people see that the D as kind of a benefit or a side caveat of the maintenance of certificate. And a lot of us end to be in the mindset that it's going to help you continue to grow. And because we expect our students to do so, that we need to do the same thing. All right, so here's the main differences between your initial certification and the maintenance of certificate. So in your initial certification, you had those 4 components. The maintenance of certificate just has 2, where each one of those components for initial certification was evaluated independently. They went to 4 different places. The maintenance certificate is holistic. What that means is that one person will be reading through everything in its entirety, and it'll be somebody who's an NBCT in your same certification evidence. In the initial certification, they were looking for clear, consistent, and convincing evidence, And for your maintenance certificate, you're just giving sufficient evidence that you're still an NBCT and still hold on to those principles that make you an NBCT. In the initial certification, you were trying to get to a specific score. Here, maintenance certificate is pass fail. You either achieve maintenance certificate and get to keep your certificate, or you don't. And remember, most NBCTs are going to pass on their first try. Initial certification, you could bank scores. Maintenance, you don't. There's not an assessment center in the maintenance certificate. And you can see the huge, not only cost difference between the two, but also the number of hours that it takes for completion. So as I said, all those components are going to be evaluated as one entity. We'll look at that scoring rubric later. And then you'll receive a decision rather than a score. And you get some feedback to help you if you get a second attempt so that you can strengthen your submission for the next time. So here are some of the non-negotiables when we look at the maintenance of certificate. One, you will be completing the maintenance certificate in your original certificate area, beginning in whether year 4 or 5. It's going to require you to look at your professional accomplishments here in the last 5 years. So you go back 5 years from your initial certificate area, although there'll be a few of you that are looking back to in the last 10 years, because it's been 10 years since your last renewal. So your license has to be current, and if for some reason your NBCT status, if you don't renew or you don't go through maintenance certificate, you have to go back through the original process. One thing I would encourage you to do is to go into NBCT and update your My profile. I don't know how it was for you, but when they went to the new website, I got alert and went ahead and went in and changed some information. And then you have to meet all the deadlines. So some important dates for those of you who are going through MOC in this coming year is one, the registration window opens September 1st through February 28th. What that means is that by February 28th, you have to pay your fees. Everything that you need to start with national boards or for maintenance of certificate is open source. It's already available on the website, and actually I put that on one of those first slides. So everything you need to get started, you can go ahead and get started. And I don't know about you, but I like to hold on to my money until the last minute. Plus I use my stipend to pay for maintenance of certificate. So February 28th, 2022 is when you would have to have the fees paid or decide that you want to withdraw. The submission window opens on April 1st. So if you are somebody who is more of a A-type personality, or you use your spring break to finish with your maintenance of certificate, there's nothing that you can do until April 1st. On April 1st, the window opens up and you can submit your documents. You can see them, but it doesn't give you an ability to submit until April 1st. And then the end of submission window, or the submission window, will close usually in mid-May. And then the decisions are released in December. This is different from years past. Usually for MOC or for renewal, we got our decisions in February, but that's been moved to latest is in December. So here's how you can prepare for your journey. Like if you are in those earlier years, there's a couple of you that are 5 years out, you're just going to start thinking about your professional growth experiences. Maybe start a document that is looking at where you can keep track of all your professional growth, or really start putting those into PowerSchool. So I didn't always do a great job of adding those into STIPD, but if you're looking to go into maintenance of certificate, go ahead and put every single thing in there, which will make it easier when you start to look at your PGEs. And here, this is when you start thinking about and looking at your practice and figuring out where are areas that you need to grow, and then looking for professional development in those areas. In year 2, you'll start tracking that information, maybe growing a little bit more in those areas where you notice that you needed to tighten up your learning. So year 3, you'll keep collecting. You can record as early as September 1st of that 3rd year. All right, so if you are 3 years out and you start this year, something that you record starting in September 1st, you'll be able to use for the next 2 years. So you can go ahead and start, for those of you who are getting ready to do the maintenance of certificate either this year or next year, 2022, 2023. If you wanted to start recording this year, things that you could use then. Or if you are going through the maintenance certificate this year, you are submitting this year, then things that you recorded last year after September 1st, you would be able to use those as well. And then year 4, you're ready to get started, pay your fees and get moving. And then year 5, this is your last chance. And so all these are on page number 3 in the maintenance certificate. So this is the same information, but just laid out as more of a roadmap. That here's your starting point. You're going to get started. You're going to look at that MOC document. You're going to read your standards and update your profile. Then your second step is to reconnect. Look at those 5 core propositions and look at the standards and the architecture of accomplished teaching. And then start developing a plan, start figuring out how those instructions work and how you want to implement that MOC in your classroom. And then start gathering up your samples of products, and then format and submit. And then here's my favorite one right here, celebrate. Have to celebrate this huge accomplishment that you are in maintaining your certificate. So reconnecting with accomplished teaching. Okay, so remember when you went through your initial certification that here's your architecture of accomplished teaching. And you always start down here with getting to know your students. And remember that students in the 5 core propositions are committed to your students and their learning. So right now, before you even begin, when you're thinking about going back to school, accomplished teachers are thinking about ways to dig into who students are in order to figure out what they need and how you can get them to move through the growth process with you. Remember, we set high, worthwhile goals for students, implement instruction to attain the goals for the instruction, evaluate those students' learning, reflect on their learning, and then set high goals, not just for yourself, but also for your students, because teachers are members of the learning community. And there's a video that we're not going to watch. So we're going to start digging into the maintenance of certificate. The maintenance of certificate has 2 main components. So this is an overview of everything that you would have to do in order to maintain your certificate. It only has 2 components, component 1 and component 2. In component 1, you're going to look at 2 PGs. Remember, those are areas of professional growth, areas of growth that you've had either in the last 5 or 10 years, depending on where you are. And then each one of those has 2 samples of work product, and we'll look at those in a little more detail here in a minute. Once you figure out those PGEs, those areas of professional growth, you're going to use one of those to make a video in your initial certificate area. So let's talk about each of these in a little more detail. So component one, we're going to dig into this component one. For component one, you've got 8 pages of written commentary. So 4 for PGE-A and 4 for PGE-B. So you're just writing out 4 pages about an area of growth. And we're going to talk about your growth areas in just a second. And then provide 2 samples or 2 pieces of evidence that go along with those. So when you think about a sample of product or a sample work product, I'm reading, or I read through Bobby Faulkner's book, Navigating Certification. And one of the things that she talks about in here that I thought was really great was that this sample of product is really like if the national boards was a judge in a courtroom, this is evidence that you would put forth to support what you put in your findings or what you put in your brief. So think of yourself as a lawyer who's giving evidence to the judge about your teaching practice. So when you start thinking about your samples of products, you want them to be strong pieces of evidence that support what you wrote about in either PGE-A or PGE-B. These PGEs, these professional growth experiences, are going to be the hardest things that you do in the whole process. Because in your initial certification, what you had to write about was very prescribed. National boards wanted to see very specific things as you went through the process. And they told you specifically, how do you do this? Show me this particular piece of information. MOC isn't like that. In MOC, your professional growth in the last 5 or 10 years is very personal. Our growth is personal. Our experience with our students are personal. What our classroom needs, what our school needs, what our district needs, what you need as a learner or what you need as a leader are personal, right? Those are things that are close to our heart, that define you who you are as a teacher and as an educator and as a person sometimes. And so the downside to that is that digging in and thinking about these professional growth experiences or what your areas of growth are will be different for every single person who's going through the process. The beautiful thing about it is that unlike initial certification, here your cohort are other people who are going through this maintenance of certificate process. It's a lot broader community because all of you are growing in different ways. And the ways that you're growing aren't always specific to your certificate, aren't always specific to your certificate area. All right, so let's talk about these a little bit. When we go into, and I'm going to give you some practice in looking at your PGEs or developing some of your PGEs. So you've got 4 pages of written commentary for each one of these PGEs, and you're going to submit those on a template. Now, for most of you, you'll start your writing either in a Word document or a Google Doc, and then you'll just copy and paste those into the template that's formatted according to the size margins that you'll need. And then 2 pages of sample products per PGE for a total of 12 pages. So all of this together for component 1, which is the biggest piece of it, is just 12 pages. 8 of written commentary that we're going to look at the prompts in just a second, and then 2 pieces of that evidence that you're going to put forth to the judge. And those samples of work products or SOPs are things that you're going to talk about in PGE-A and PGE-B or PGE-1 and PGE-2. So when you're thinking about those professional growth experiences, here's a couple of things that I want you to think about. One, it should be new learning, something that has been ongoing or has evolved since your initial certification. So in the last 5 or 10 years, it's an area of growth or a bucket that you have done a lot of learning in. So if you think about last year, all right, if you're like me, one of my new learning that I did was in the area of technology. So using technology to connect with students, or using technology for formative assessment, or using technology to engage students. This was a new learning experience for me. Your PGE should show also your influence within the classroom and beyond the classroom. So how does this area of growth, how did that impact your colleagues? How did it impact your students? How did it impact yourself? How did it impact your school, or how did it impact your district? And then, as always, whatever this area of growth is, should have an impact on student learning and a positive impact. And both of those need to show professional growth in your original certificate area. And then here I give you the pages that showcase, that talk about more details about these PGEs. All right, so you'll start thinking about, where have I grown in the last 5 or 10 years? Once you figure out what your PGE is, and we're going to dig into those here in just a minute, you'll answer these particular prompts. So the very first prompt is to provide the context of the professional situation that indicates the need of students, all right, or the community, or yourself, or the parents. Okay, the context of the professional situation is the backstory. All right, so if you're looking at the first thing that you're trying to figure out is, what was the need? What needed to be done? Did you have a change in situation? So did you go from teaching one grade level to another grade level, and the need was yours? You needed to be able to understand this content a little bit better. Did you have to go back to school to get your master's degree? Did you, was there a need to have help EL students, or help your students who were English language learners? I know there's a new term for that, in your classroom. Was it that you had to figure out how to use technology? Was it that your district went to all virtual learning and you needed to figure out how to engage students? That's your need. And then the context of the situation, that's the backstory. You used to be able to do it like this, or you noticed that the absences in your school district were high, or you had higher behavior issues, or you had an influx of Hispanic students. The context of the situation is how it used to be. It's just framing what the need is. So that's the very first question. The second one just asks you to describe your PGE. What is your area of growth? Tell them about it. And in the documentation, it even asks you to give it a title, to title that PGE. My PGE is, I'm using technology for formative assessment. My PGE is using technology to figure out the social emotional needs of students. Or your PGE is using data to determine areas of growth for students. Whatever it is, you're just talking about, here's your opportunity to talk about whatever your area of growth is. Prompt number 3 wants you to explain how you deepened either your content certificate area knowledge or your pedagogy and skills. How did you keep those current? And notice how it says to include the use of research. That may not be formal research. That could be a book study, or you may have joined a Twitter group or a Facebook group to increase your knowledge and skills in a specific area. And then here, analyze the ways that each of your PGEs positively impacted student learning. So whatever you decide as your area of growth, you'll want that to have a positive impact on student learning, either for your students or for, if you're a leader, for the students of your colleagues. And then here for prompt number 5, it asks you to reflect on each one of those PGEs, A and B, or 1 and 2, on the changes, additions, and next steps that would enhance your professional growth. And I'm going to give you some opportunities to look at that, to look at those areas of growth and to practice some reflection prompts here in just a minute. All right, so after those questions have to be completed for both of those PGEs. And then also you'll have 4 other prompts that can be answered anywhere in one of the 2. They can be answered in both, but they're not required. So here you also have to talk about, either in your PGE A or B, of how you effectively integrated technology into your practice. You'll have to also talk about how you ensured fairness and equity of access and promoted diversity within your classroom. And then you also have a specific prompt about this in component 2, which we'll talk about later. Explain how your interactions with colleagues, professional groups, parents, of the community enhanced your professional growth. So how did this area of growth not only impact you, but also impact either colleagues, parents, or the community? And then in the broader context, look at your PGEs together, and what did you notice about yourself? What kind of patterns emerged in your teaching practice that define you as an educator? Who, when you look at these areas of growth, what does it say about you? What did you figure out about yourself? Okay, so what are some PGE examples? And here in just a second, we're going to look at yours specifically, but what are some things that could serve as areas of growth? And here are just a few examples that you can think about. Trauma-sensitive instruction, leadership, remote instruction, PLCs, parent involvement, learning supports. And these are very broad PGEs. Yours will be a little bit tighter, so that it'll make writing in doing your writing a little bit easier. Here are some other examples. Think about grant writing, mentoring and coaching, special projects, any analysis that you've done on instructional resources, any research that you've conducted, either formal or informal, collaboration with colleagues or the community, websites, blogs, or other communications that you've used. Okay, so here I'm going to copy this link, and I'm going to put this link, whoops. I'm going to put this link here in the chat. And we're going to brainstorm through some of these PGEs. All right, so I've divided these into sections, and you should be able to edit this document or be able to type directly on it. And what I want you to think about are your areas of growth over the last 5 or 10 years, and we're going to spend a minute on this. So either in leadership, in new learning that you've done over the last few years, interactions with parents or community, and that's repeated here on this second slide. And then on the third and fourth slide, other things that you can think about. And let me double check to make sure that you can edit. You can. So think about your learning in the last 5 or 10 years, and you're going to type right on this document. Figuring out your PGEs is the hardest part of the process. And it's a hard part of the process because a lot of times when you look at yourself as teachers, you use a terrible 4-letter word, just. I just did this. I just do this. What I do is not important. Well, if the pandemic showed anything, it showed that what we do is very important, and it's hard work, and not just anybody can do it. And it takes a lot of planning and creativity to make it happen. So I want you to think about your learning, your areas of growth, your areas of passion, and type them into one of these places. Don't worry about your spelling, because once you start typing, it is difficult to, my spelling goes right out the window. I don't know about yours. And there's no wrong answer. You're just brainstorming, thinking about anything that you have done, any professional development that you have attended, that you have led, book studies that you have led, books that you read to increase your knowledge. Like this summer, I read a book on increasing resilience for teachers. What kind of things have you done? And then in your instructional coaching, specifically, where was that? Good. What about technology? Did you learn any new technology? If so, list out the different types of technology that you learned about and that you used. And like I said, there's no wrong answer. And then we're going to dig into these a little bit here in a second. Any classes that you attended? If you got your master's or EDD? If you dug into student advocacy, any social emotional training that you've done, either for your students or for yourself, any formative assessments that you've used, any tools that you developed for parent communication. Here, I'm just making it a little bit smaller. It's hard, right? Thinking about your areas of growth. Where have you grown as a learner in the last few years? Or where have you grown as a leader? What are the things in the classroom where other people come to you? Where are you the expert? I'm the expert in differentiated instruction, using personalities to determine learning. Think about your passions. What are you passionate about? What do you like to read about when you're looking at educational material? What Facebook groups do you belong to? Who do you follow on Twitter? What are you reading? What is a book study that you want to do? What about diversity training? Have you done a book study on how to be an anti-racist? Implementing culturally relevant instruction for your students. Social emotional training. New learning that you've done to engage student learning. Did you do, are you using Kami, GoFormative, Kahoot, Quizlet, online whiteboard instruction? Yeah, Nearpod, Pear Deck. Here, I'm going to make this a little smaller. This one-on-one, I'm in the first box, I think. This one-on-one training for parents and students to learn technology formats, was that virtual or was that face-to-face? And then did you provide that same training to did you share that training with colleagues? Did you make videos for that? And then did you share those videos in the wider community? Okay. All right, and then when we go to this one where I'm looking at social justice and anti-bullying, were those book studies? Was that a Facebook group? Was that a Twitter group? And then was that you learning or leading? Good. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Okay. All right, so now we're just doing a little bit of brainstorming so that you can think about your areas of growth over the last 5 or 10 years, because you're gonna have to write about these. All right, so let's backtrack just a little bit. So when you look at whatever you typed into one of these PGEs, what was the need that you were addressing? And if you want to unmute and talk, you can. You can type in the chat box if you wish. But for each one of these, there was a reason why you had this area of growth or that you pursued this professional development. That's the need. Okay, you figured out Nearpod, or you went through this anti-bullying strategy, or you started digging into social emotional learning for a reason. Was it because your students were not very resilient? Was it because you noticed that a lot of your students were depressed? Did you go through the training because you had went to a different training and found out that many students have had an emotional trauma in their past, and when you have an emotional trauma, you carry that forward with you forever, right? Even into adulthood, you carry that forward with you. What was the reason why you decided to do this technology? Why did you start doing these student-led conferences? What was it about? Why did you need these ADHD strategies? What is it about that area of growth that filled a need? That's what you're looking for in your PGEs. Okay, so we spend this time thinking about our areas of growth because it's the hardest part. You can't do anything until you've done this part. And then once you figure out all these different areas of growth that you have to organize those into a single consciousness or a single bucket. I could do formative assessment and small group instruction and learning using sorting cards with my students and learning their multiple intelligences and learning their personality preferences, and put all of those things under the same umbrella of differentiated instruction. You could look at trauma-based instruction. You could look at depression. You could look at a number of things and put them under the umbrella of helping students grow as individuals. You could look at using data to inform instruction, where you have students that haven't met their learning goals. And because they're not meeting their learning goals, you had to do all these different things. All of these things together encompass this one area of growth. Or helping students connect virtually. And so you used Nearpod, you used Kahoot, you used Quizlet, you made online videos, you had one-on-one chats with students. All of those things fit under a single umbrella. So the best way to do your PGs, or to try to figure out what your areas of growth are, is to write down every single professional development that you have done over the last 5 years, and then put those under big umbrellas. When you look at leadership, okay, so for most of you, you are already NBCTs. You've been NBCTs for 5, 10, 20 years, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. By this point, you are an expert in an area. I don't know what it is, but you are filling some type of leadership capacity, something. I don't know what it is, but in that leadership role, or it's multiple, you are a leader in this, and this. My faculty depends on you to do this, and this. You provide technology training. You teach them how to incorporate formative assessment. You help them figure out how to make videos. You teach them how to do student-led conferences. What are all the things that fit under this leadership umbrella, okay, or this technology umbrella, or this literacy umbrella, or this meeting students with exceptional needs umbrella, or working with ELL students. I think it's emerging language learners now. What are all the things that you've done? How are you working to combat an appreciation, or to give an appreciation for diversity in your school? Well, I did all this learning, and then I transformed that learning into this in my classroom. All of these things fit under an umbrella. Your professional growth is not going to be just one thing. I attended a conference on how to make foldables, right? Your professional growth it's bigger than that. When you look at your growth, you're looking at the depth and breadth, all of this stuff together. Okay, so questions or comments about that? Thank you, Dr. Shields. Okay, this is your moment to talk about your PGs before we dig into some of this other stuff. So does anybody want to share what you're thinking for one of your PGs?
I'm thinking, well, my passion is literacy, and I have a tremendous amount of professional development and leadership and things I've done in school regarding literacy. What I'm afraid of, what I'm thinking here, listening to you, when I think of my pattern of learning and all that, it's almost like I have too much and it's too broad. So should I really single in to like one aspect of it, or do you keep it broad and that makes it easy to write those 4 written pages?
This is an excellent question. You'll want to give it a title, narrow it down into a topic. Like maybe in literacy, you could break it down into literacy leadership, right? All the ways that you lead teachers towards leadership, and then literacy, all the different strategies that you use with yourself, that you use with teachers for literacy, or technology and literacy, or whatever. So try to make that bucket deep, lots of different things, but keep the subject of it pretty tight. That's why they encourage you to make a title, because for so many of us, our leadership is huge. Like the things that we do in our classroom are gigantic. So it's very easy when you start writing to get into a rabbit hole and go, oh yes, I forgot about this thing over here. And so if you can make your topic have a specific title, working with middle school teachers to increase their literacy strategies with students, right? Try to give yourself a title so that as you're writing, you only write about that one component of literacy, even though it spans a bunch of different things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm just trying to process in my mind what all I can write about. So, I mean, fortunately, I've taught a gazillion years, so I have a lot of things that I could choose from. So I'm just trying to process in my head. So yeah, that did make sense. And this is helpful.
Well, you've got to think too, is that if you've been teaching for a million years, and we are big learners and reflectors. So I mean, the amount of stuff that I've read this summer is like, it was all over the place. There was a ton of it. You're not going to, if you are an exceptional teacher, which you are, all of you are, because you're NBCTs, you're going to have way more growth and learning than you can possibly talk about. You just can't. You will not be able to talk about every single thing you do because it's too much. Right? It's just, there's no way that you can encompass everything that you are and everything that you do in 4 pages or even in 8 pages. It's just not possible. So that's why thinking about or listing out all the different things that you do concerning literacy or in anything in general, really, and then putting those into buckets. See where you can take them and put them under the same umbrella. Like all of this is leadership. All of this is me. I learned this skill because I saw this need and I taught that skill to all these other people. Or I learned this skill and I used it in my classroom in all these different ways. You won't want it to be just one thing that you did, one conference that you attended, or one strategy that you implemented. But how does that strategy fit into a broader idea? That's what makes this PGE digging into so hard, is trying to figure out what are all the things that I do and which ones do I want to talk about and how do they fit together? You know, right now I'm doing this, I was in class all summer long looking at a modern classroom, trying to figure out different ways to serve my students, making it a way to allow for collaboration and mastery checks so that students can move at their own pace through the instruction, giving me time to work with other groups of students as we work through this process. It encompassed all these different things that I learned about this this summer, and also included many things that I've learned in the past. I need to put all those things together into helping students become more engaged in science content, or helping students be collaborative learners, or whatever. So I hope that was helpful. I might have went on a tangent. I'm not positive. Who else? All right, let me see what else you have here. Good. So
Dr.
Elizabeth,
Hamilton. Oh,
Mhm.
oh,
Elizabeth, you won't talk about just just supporting students or teachers through the national board process. So that leadership will be one thing that you do in several other things. So it may be that the national board process is the biggest piece that you talk about, and you made meetings and you observed them in their classroom, and you gave them feedback, and you gave them opportunities to go look at other teachers instructing, right? That's one piece, but there's probably other leadership things that you did within that too, that you want to talk about. The leadership roles I had were this, and this. I did this because of this. I did this because of this. The next way that I increased in my leadership is by doing this. It won't be just one thing. It'll be all these different things that you do, all these different things that you do.
Hey, this is Melissa. I was just throwing in the chat as she was talking about literacy, because we get that a lot. Like, you know, you can't just do social studies. You can't just do literacy. So as she was talking, I was just kind of brainstorming some of those things. But we've seen folks, you know, really focus on literacy, but on interventions within literacy, you know, filling in gaps, reaching reluctant readers, you know, the male population in your classroom. What are you doing to really promote literacy and provide relevant, you know, text for them? Culturally relevant literature. So there's lots of ways to kind of break that down when your area of expertise may be literacy or ELA, and focus on that. I think the hard thing now is just what Dr. Hamilton said, picking the two. Which two do you think are going to be the most high yield to demonstrate your growth? Because we're always growing.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. Okay, anybody else want to talk about their PGs? And maybe what we need to do is let this rest for just a minute. Like, this document is, oh, you have access to this, it'll stay up. And so it'll be available to you, and you can come back and look at it later. You can make a copy of it and use it for yourself if you wish. But let's sit on this for a second and let you think about your PGs, and then we'll circle back to it in a little bit to let your brain rest a little. But we will come back to it. Okay, now once you decide on your area of growth, you've got to provide that evidence to the judge, right? Your sample of products. So some things that you might want to use is student work. Student work is an excellent way to give the evidence for what you talked about in your paper. Photographs of students, test scores, testimonials. Now, any testimonials that you get from teachers or other staff, make sure they're talking specifically about what you addressed in your PGE. So it's not going to be like a letter of support for you in general. It would be a letter of support for what you said that you did in the PGE. All right. Emails from students and families, you'll take out their names. We'll talk about anonymity here in a second. Quantitative or qualitative data, attendance rates, screenshots, summaries of outcomes, feedback from training that you led. Notice nowhere in here does it say a certificate of attendance for professional development that you attended, right? It's it's going to be something that provides a little bit more evidence to support what you wrote about in those 4 pages. Okay, and you only get 2, so it's going to be the things that you talked about in your paper, in your PGE. All right, and national boards provide you with this checklist. This is inside that MOC document that we linked on the first page, where you can go through and look, right, as you're reading through your PGE, did I identify the need? Right, when I wrote about, did I answer the prompt about the need? Oh, dang, I forgot to do that. I need to work on that. All right, did you talk about in your writing how you increased your certificate area skills or your pedagogy? Oh yeah, I did that. Okay, yes. All right, explains how you integrated technology to positively impact student learning. Oh shoot, I talked about all these things that I did, but I didn't tell about how it impacted student learning. I need to go back and work on that. Did it show positive impact on, or did it show fairness and equity and promote appreciation for diversity? Okay, this one did, but this one didn't. All right, I've covered that one time, I'm good to go. So the national board, it provides you with, it's much more transparent. If you went through the renewal process, it was kind of a mystery of what they were looking for. And there were some hidden things that were on the criterion rubric that wasn't specifically in the writing prompts. It's not like that way with the MOC. It's much tighter, and it gives you checklists that you can go through. Oh shoot, I only went in and I talked about just one thing. I didn't show where it was ongoing and varied. I only talked about this one conference I went to one time. Okay, that's not going to be enough. I need to add to this PGE. All right, so this checklist is extremely helpful. All right, that's component 1. We're going to set that aside for just a second and look at component 2 for a minute, and then we'll circle back around at the end. All right, so for component 2, you're going to take one of those areas of growth using literacy strategies to improve student performance or whatever. And you're going to do 5 pages of written commentary and submit a video. So it has to be with your original certificate area. So pick one of the 2, and this one you're going to write about it. And it's the most fun, right? Because it's what you do and you're talking about your students. So it's amazing. So in number 2, the class has to be in your original certificate area and has to be students in the appropriate age range. Remember that you can use videotapes from the previous year up to like the 3rd year before your MOC process. So if you did any recording this year and that you're going to submit next year, you'd be able to use that. It can be segmented into 3 parts, but still you can't have any transitions or do anything fancy in it. It can just be cut into 3 sections. And those 3 sections could be any length with a max of 5 minutes. It has to be date stamped, which mine never were. I had to use that form, which is fine. And it has to show you and your students working together. So when you're thinking about what to videotape, you want to choose something where there is discourse. The students talking together, the students talking to you, you talking to the students talking to each other, where there's conversation so that you can talk about your instruction and you can talk about the students learning. It can't be something where they're sitting doing something independently. It has to be interactive using peer, think pair shares, or you asking Socratic questions to students, etc. So when you think about these PGs, or you think about your areas of growth, or you think about your instruction over the last few years, where is a lesson that you can use or a lesson that you can develop that will allow you to see these interactions with students and will allow you to interact with them in this authentic way. And again, the National Boards provides for you this rubric where you can look at the learning climate, if there's evidence in the video for each one of these questions, and ability to give reflection on each one of these. So when you're looking at, did the video that you chose as your 10-minute section show and support collaboration amongst peers? Can you see them collaborating together? Does it show how you have a respectful exchange? Does it show how you promote diversity and equity within your classroom? So it provides you a checklist on those pages. Here are your prompts. Number 1, how has your learning or professional growth as described in the PGE been applied in this lesson? All right, so in your PGE, you've talked about a ton of things. All right, in your literacy, you've talked about this, and this. So here it wants to know specifically which, in that area of growth, what are you going to talk about in this one? You identified all these things that were areas of growth in this PGE A. Which one of those are you going to talk about here, and how has that been applied? For instance, if you were talking about formative assessments, all right, how was that applied in here? In this one, we specifically did this, or we were working on this specific literacy, all these different literacy strategies. In this PGE, I'm specifically using these two. For question number 2, for the featured lesson, what were the goals for the lesson? Now, this is a beautiful thing in your goals, because down at number 6, it's going to ask you about student learning. And so in your video, you'll be looking for where the students met these goals. So in your lesson, you'll have specific goals that you want your students to meet in the lesson. The beautiful thing about this is that, let's say, like when I videotape a lesson, I had these specific goals that I thought that I was going to see. But in emerges this other thing that happens. You can go back and revise your goals to say, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I'm going to make this one of my goals now. And then how does this fit into the broader context of learning? All right, so this is one lesson about this topic. How does it fit into everything, all of your instruction in general? Does it set the stage for what's coming next? Or is it a summative activity for all these things that are cumulative activity for all these things that they've done in the past? How does it fit into the broader context of learning? And then why are they doing this lesson? Why is it important for these students at this particular time? And in this videotape, where am I seeing equity and fairness and appreciation for diversity? Where can you show me that in the video? Question 5 is a trick question. How does the video recording reflect your certificate specific content area? Remember in the back where, in the beginning where I said 9 out of 10 teachers renew or achieve maintenance of certificate? Those that don't, their video was not in their certificate area, or they didn't indicate that it was the appropriate age range of the students. So for prompt number 5, it's not going to be a long paragraph that you talk about. You're just going to say, my certificate area is in AYA science, and this lesson was on this specific science skill that the students needed to do. Ta-da. All right, explain the impact of your teaching on student learning. Even though that's singular student learning, you will talk about as many students that you can fit in here. It's 5 pages. Probably 2 of those pages is going to be an analysis of the learning that took place for the students and how those students met those goals. Notice how it says, cite specific examples from the video to identify what they illustrate. Here you can see the student meeting goal number 1. When the student says this, and I respond with this, and then they think about it for a minute and they go, oh, could it be this? And you go, yes, exactly, very good job. All right, and then 7, reflecting on this activity in the video, what would you do differently in the future? What would you change in the future about the video to enhance the student learning? Well, dang, if I had known that they were going to get this far, I would have included this. Or I didn't realize that they would need this other background information to be successful in this portion of the unit or the video or the lesson. So in the future, I would provide this background information first before they moved on to this. And then reflecting on the video, thinking about the video, what else do you need for your professional growth? All right, this lesson was on this. I need to do a better job of helping students analyze their learning, or I need to do a better job of helping students make a justification for their learning, or I didn't give them enough prompts to help them practice. I need to go into some other instruction to learn how to do this piece better. Or my multi-language learners struggled in this. So I need to do some professional development so that I can make this activity more inclusive of those students. That is component number 2, right? And the instructions are on page number 4. And you have to fit all of those into just 5 pages, you know, and we'll talk about how to do this analysis and reflecting piece in just a second. Okay, here's your rubric. Right, so this is your grading rubric that they look at to see if you are renewed or non-renewed. And look at that, each one of these are related to one of the prompts that is present in your writing, right? And so they're looking at this piece. And here you've got, they also give you a tool so that you can look through and see if you have met the standards or provides sufficient, notice this, sufficient evidence that you did all these things. And then here's your rubric that's provided. So some other things to think about. You'll do 3 types of writing: descriptive writing, analytical writing, and reflective writing. And what's going to happen for almost every single one of you, that when you start writing, all 4 pages are going to be descriptive. What you did. This is what I did. This is what I did. This is what I did. These are all the professional developments I attended. These are all the ways that I led. These are all the ways that I used technology. These are all the ways that I did this. That is descriptive writing. But as a National Board Certified teacher, they want more from you. It's not just describing what you did, but why did you do it? And why was it important for student learning? What did you learn from the experience? Right, so many of you, when you start writing, the main mistake that you're going to make is that it's going to be descriptive. What did you do? Okay, but when you do this writing, what did you do? Why is it important? How did it impact student learning? Those 3 things. All right, so let's do a little bit of practice on this analytical and reflective writing. So I've given you some prompts. I want you to think about something that you did last year, some lesson that you learned about, or some area of growth that you had last year. And I want you to answer one of these sentence stems. This is analytical writing. This was significant. Your lesson was significant because, or this learning was significant because I know that students do X, Y, and Z. I planned, provided, taught, organized, which shows, here's your analysis piece of it. What you did, why it is important. I chose this because. There are several reasons why. The rationale, this is one of my favorites. The rationale behind my decision to do this was this. this impacted student learning by. So in the chat, answer one of these sentence stems. This is from Bobby Faulkner's book, page 66. I give you that down at the bottom, where she gives you these analytical writing prompts to think about your analytical writing. So pick one, it doesn't matter which one, and answer the prompt in the chat. It's harder, right? It's analytical writing. It's a little bit harder. We can describe what we did. I did this. I did this. I did this. But analytical writing asks you to figure out not just what you did, but why did you do it? That ESL training that you went to, why did you do that? Why was the learning significant? When you went to that anti-racist training, what did you learn from that? And why did you do it in the first place? When you looked at the data, what did you see? And because of that, what did you do? This analytical writing is the why behind your writing. And it's a little tougher. I give you about another minute. It's okay. If I had to grade for grammar and semantics, I'd be in big trouble. Good, and you can make that even more personal by saying Jim or Joni or Saeed. You know, talk about, you know, your students and you know that they have this deficit in spatial awareness. So because of that, you did this, which helped the student, blah, blah, blah. And encourage more participation, right, Misty? And then Brenda, such as, okay, you did this, the rationale for you to join this cohort was to grow as a leader and develop qualities needed to lead teachers grow in effective literacy practices, such as these, which helped me do this.
Here, well,
Good, very good. And that's really brave of you too. It's so hard to put yourself out there, right? Very good. Okay, that's analytical writing. So try this one. This is reflective writing. So now she's going to ask you to do these two things: descriptive, short. I did this. Why did you do it? All this stuff. Because. So here's your reflective prompt. In the future, I will. The key success was an area of growth is. So I want you to think about last year. Any lesson, any instruction, any lesson learned. And answer one of these prompts in the text, or answer one of these prompts in the chat box. And these are also from Bobby Faulkner's book, Navigating Certification, page 68, which I bought on Amazon. To me, the reflective piece of it isn't as difficult as the analytical piece, because that's what we do all the time. I mean, the title of the book is called Navigating Certification by Bobby Faulkner. And it specifically says maintenance of certificate on it. It was pretty good. I enjoyed going through it. You see, I've dog-eared it to death. What was the success that you had last year? What is an area of growth that you know you still have? If you were going to do last year again, what would you do differently? Good, Elizabeth. And you can even take that further. You know, you planned and provided the screencast-ified trainings during the pandemic. And because of that, these retired teachers were able to do X, Y, and Z. Good. About a minute. And it's just practice. The same thing with our kids, right? We make them do things multiple times just so that they get better at it. What's the research say? That you have to do something 10,000 times to become very good at it? But you won't have time for that because you only got a year. So give you some practice now. About 30 seconds. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, so one of the things that you want to look at is using those strong measurable verbs. So here we give you a couple of examples on how to, in your writing, make a stronger argument, especially like the one down at the bottom where students show growth on their tests. And I work with students who performs at a low level, right? That doesn't give you a lot of information, doesn't give you a lot of depth. It's not sufficient. But after analyzing the formative assessments, students, supported my students scoring below 75%. Because of this, students have the opportunity to identify areas of challenge and determine the support resource that could both strengthen their knowledge. Much deeper, right? Shows that you really understand. It's an analysis of what those students did. And in here, in your writing, we'll be looking for, national boards will be looking for how you are vigilant, right? Vigilant at ensuring that they receive, each student receives their fair share of attention. You know, not just your students that are the loudest, or not just the students that need that positive feedback, but every student, no matter what their circumstances, is seen and known for who they are at their core in your classes. And how can your assessors see that, right? You'll be looking for ways that no matter what the background of the students are, that all of them have the same learning opportunity in your class. And I know you've seen this 1,000 times. You're just making it fair for every student. And here are some different ways where you can ensure equity and diversity for all your students. You make sure that you know what your own bias is and set that aside. And not only your bias, but also the student bias, that every person carries bias with them, and making your classroom one that is a community of learners that care about each other. And everyone has a voice. So these are all different ways that we provide access. And sometimes it's just in our room arrangement, or giving them the opportunity to talk, or accepting each other's differences. Okay, here's the fun part, your submission. All right, it'll be formatted for you anyway when you put it in the template with the 1-inch margins. And you use that 11 Arial font. It'll be double spaced. If you use any acronyms, make sure you spell them out the first time. And then they'll just be submitted on the template. Anonymity, make sure that you remove, just like before, students' last names. You can use their first name. I would strongly encourage you to use first names. And then other teachers, Miss S, Miss B. And then anything that identifies your school or district or state has to be redacted or just removed. So you'll just talk about your suburban school or your high school or Blue Hills School, make up something. And then more checklist, which is so helpful. All right, so when you submit online, this is what it looks like. And you won't get the submit button until April 1st. But you can go in, and if you click start, the wonderful thing about the template is that it has the writing prompts up above so that you can look at them as you're writing and don't have to keep referring back to the paper. But it has each one of your components is submitted this way. And then you just hit submit, which is awesome. Okay, so some things you need to do. One, update your profile. Go ahead and get that done, update it. It says to pay by the deadline. So I make my payments on February 28th. I might do it on 27th in case there's any kind of problems. Download your materials. I've given you links to all those. If you're a paper person, go ahead and print them off. Read your standards. Go back and review your standards. And then your hardest part, to figure out your PGEs, right? Go in, what are my areas of growth and how can I connect them together? Get your student forms signed. Now, at the beginning of school is the best time to do that. You're sending home 1 million pieces of paper. Add your student release form in there. And then start videotaping. And then many, Dr. Shields said that many of the in-service center have technology that you can use and borrow. Questions. Here's my contact information. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes. So anything else that if you want to talk about your, either one of the PGEs, if you just have general questions, you can type in the chat box. Thank you, Misty, for adding that in there. Any questions, concerns?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, so I am very, very passionate about social and cultural equality. I work in an area where there is a lot of cultural unrest with Black and white issues. I know during the elections, there was a lot of, you could tell my kids were really anxious about the elections and what was going on. So one of the things that I really tried to do, and I'm a special ed teacher, so having a safe place and having a classroom where all my students feel involved and validated, no matter their abilities or their cultural backgrounds and stuff, is very important. And I thought, I've done a lot of different types of lessons, bringing that out, especially during Martin Luther King month. But I wanted to know how, I know there's so much black and white, and not not skin color, but just how so many people are so right wing and left wing now. I want to be sensitive in my writing with my feelings of providing my students a platform to be able to discuss their emotions about civil unrest and such. And I thought I went to a Black Lives Matter demonstration in the community I serve. And I felt like that was very beneficial for me, being a white person, so that my family's, you know, I'm there to support them and want to let them know they're my gosh, a safe place. So I was just curious about the sensitivity in my write up, you know, without
In the
coming
actual
across as,
writing,
you know,
in your actual writing, yeah, I think that you'll just be, I think because you're writing in a descriptive and analytical way where you'll be describing the circumstances, it's mostly going to be about your area of growth or the area of growth for your students or in your teaching. So when you talk about the need, you'll talk about the context of the situation. You know, you work in a district where there is unrest or uncomfort or tension between racial groups. And so you saw this need for either yourself or your students to grow and acknowledge this cultural biases that we all carry around with us. And then just go through and talk about what you did, why it was important, and how it impacts student learning. And the National Board is not judging you on what you write on your paper. It's just you're just providing evidence of how you grew in this area and how that growth impacted student learning. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Even though it's very emotional, the emotional piece of it will be tied to either the lessons that you talk about with the students or the growth that you underwent. That growth is always, no matter what the topic is, it's emotional. You know, we feel it. If you're not feeling that growth, then probably not growing all that much. And so you'll have some emotion that's in there, but you won't talk about the emotion as much. You'll talk about, once you get through the need, what you did, why it was important, how it impacted student learning, and just the details of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. And then if you're worried about it, just when you have somebody read through, ask for them to look for bias that they see in your writing or in your paper, or ways that you can improve to make it more analytical, where the focus of the writing is in the growth and in the process of growth, not so much of how you feel about it, but what you think about it and how you can use that thinking to improve your own learning and the learning for your students.
Yeah. Okay. That helps me. So like I'll put more of my emotional, personal feelings in the need, and then kind of analyze everything else in the other parts of the write-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That the need, you'll talk about that piece of it in the need, but the emotions that you feel in it will be directed towards the analytical piece of it. You'll be analyzing those feelings or analyzing what you did because of that. So you won't talk about as much about how you feel, but about what you think and how that thinking promoted learning and how that learning improved student learning.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Got about 9 minutes. So any questions or concerns? Any part of your growth that you want to think about?
This isn't a question, this is just a thank you to the guys, all of you guys, for putting this together and the hard work you do for National Board in Alabama. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. We love to do it. This is one of my favorite things to do. So I have a great passion for MOC. I love National Board Certified Teachers, and there's nothing that is closer to my, really, that's just my motion, closer to my heart than seeing you be successful. And when I see that title, I'm connected. You know, you are my sisters. This is my family, because you're all National Board Certified Teachers, and we all walked through, we all wear the same shoes, right? And we all walk through the same process. And it's hard. And to live up to that standard as a National Board Certified Teacher, it's difficult. And you owe it to your students and to the other people that are in your community to live out that title every single day. And it's not hard, it's hard sometimes. And we deal with things that are very difficult. You know, the public doesn't see our face. You know, they don't see our heart in our classroom of what we do and what we have to work for, and how everything that we do is never about us and is always about moving the profession forward and helping our students become the very best version of themselves every single day. And it's tough. And now we're asking you to dig into your life and dig into your teaching to figure out, to talk about it, to share your inner underside belly, your inner belly, your outer sensitive side, for the whole world to look at your teaching and your work product, and that you are brave enough to go through the MOC process and lay yourself out there. That's a huge thing. That's not a small thing that they say, oh, 50 hours of my heart and soul into MOC. That's what it is.
Well, I'm sure I'll spend more than 50 hours, but just congratulations to all of you guys who put this together, because you really do support Alabama National Board teachers. And I wish every child in Alabama had a National Board teacher. So they deserve it. So I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'm here to help anybody who needs extra help, but you've got about 5 minutes. So anything that you need, if you want to stay on, I can help you with. But if not, you're welcome to sign out and go to lunch. Don't forget to do your paperwork to sign in for the day. And if you need us, just let us know. There is professional development throughout the year. Melissa and I do MOC training the second Tuesday of every month, starting in August, that works through helping you work through the process. And so you'll be getting some information about that later. Anything else?